Imagine losing everything but still finding the strength to help others. Nate, a divorced father working 2 jobs, crosses paths with a grieving elderly woman at a retirement home. A single act of kindness sets off a chain of events that leads him to an unexpected love and a second chance at happiness. This is a story of compassion, healing, and serendipity that will touch your heart. Nate, a 35-year-old man, was someone who faced life's challenges with resilience while striving to stay positive. After his divorce, he sacrificed his own comfort for his daughter's happiness, leaving the house to his ex-wife and moving into a small apartment. Even though he was going through a tough financial period, his daughter's safety and well-being meant everything to him. To ensure she grew up surrounded by love, Nate made a point of maintaining healthy communication with his ex-wife. Though emotionally challenging, this was Nate's way of reflecting the deep love he had for his family. To stabilize his finances, Nate started a part-time job at a nursing home upon a friend's recommendation. This job not only provided him with some extra income but also gave him a chance to escape his own thoughts. The nursing home, with its tranquil and warm atmosphere, became a sort of refuge for Nate in his stressful life. Stepping out of his daily routine to assist the elderly, listen to their stories, and take care of small tasks made him feel useful and connected. Weekends, however, were sacred to Nate. Those were the days he got to spend with his little girl, filling their time with laughter and games. Neither exhaustion nor sleeplessness could dim the joy of those moments. Having devoted his life to his daughter, Nate knew that his time at the nursing home was a small but meaningful step toward giving her a better future. What Nate didn't realize, though, was that his time at the nursing home would one day profoundly change not only his own life but someone else's as well. If you're enjoying this heartwarming story so far, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. We bring you inspiring tales of resilience and love every day. One day, as Nate was walking home from work, he noticed the first snowflakes of the year falling from the sky. He slipped his slightly chilled hands into his pockets, and a small smile appeared on his face. He had always loved winter. The silence and purity of the snow seemed to momentarily lift the weight of the world off his shoulders. He continued walking, enjoying the peaceful evening, when his phone rang. It was the nursing home director. "Hi, Nate," the woman said, her voice tinged with concern. "Are you free right now? Something unexpected has happened." Nate stopped in his tracks. "Of course, how can I help? When do you need me to come?" he asked. Her voice carried a hint of sadness, which made Nate uneasy. "It would be great if you could come right away," she said. "Beth. We lost Beth." Beth's name echoed in Nate's mind. Beth, the sweet elderly woman who had been at the nursing home for years and had captured everyone's hearts, had passed away. Taking a deep breath, Nate hailed a cab and hurried to the nursing home. When he arrived, the atmosphere was heavy with grief. Staff and residents alike were shaken by the loss of someone so beloved. Beth's warm smile and cheerful presence were now just a memory. The loss didn't just affect the residents, it struck a chord deep within Nate as well. The director turned to Nate and said, "We're organizing a memorial service for tomorrow. The residents want to come together to honor Beth. We need to make sure everything is prepared." Nate immediately got to work. He meticulously planned every detail for the event, arranging the rooms, ordering flowers, and setting up a space for the service. As he worked, he also lent a hand to the other staff. The night wore on and exhaustion crept in, but Nate knew this was a way to pay his respects to Beth and the residents. Late into the night, he finally decided to take a brief coffee break. With a cup of hot coffee in hand, he stepped out into the nursing home's garden for some fresh air. The moonlight filtered through the snow-covered trees, casting a serene beauty over the scene. As he strolled quietly, looking for a peaceful corner, he noticed someone sitting on a bench in the distance. As he got closer, he heard the sound of soft sobs. A woman sat there, her face buried in her hands, her body trembling with restrained sobs. Nate paused, a feeling deep inside urging him to approach. He didn't want to intrude on her grief, but he also couldn't bear the thought of her feeling so alone. Gently, he stepped closer and spoke in a soft tone, "Hi there. You're sitting out here all by yourself. I don't mean to bother you, but are you okay?" The woman lifted her tear-streaked face slightly and looked at Nate. In her eyes, he saw immense pain and profound loneliness. At that moment, Nate understood just how deeply Beth's loss had affected her. This wasn't just a simple encounter, it was the beginning of a moment that would change both of their lives forever. As Nate approached the elderly woman carefully, he realized it was Elenor. She had been Beth's closest friend, and during his time at the nursing home, he often saw them together. Elenor always greeted Nate with a kind smile, a sweet, gentle soul. But now, seeing the despair and sorrow in her eyes struck Nate deeply. Elenor wiped at her tears, her voice trembling as she began to speak. "Beth. She was my best friend," she said, her tone heavy with grief. Nate picked up Eleanor's fallen shawl and gently draped it over her shoulders, placing a comforting hand on her arm. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Elenor," he said softly, his voice filled with empathy. Elenor tried to compose herself as she continued. "My daughter lives in a nearby town," she said, her voice shaking. "She's so busy with work that she doesn't visit me often. She's been having a tough time at her job and dealing with other struggles in her life. While I was worrying about her, Beth said, 'If she can't come to you, then we'll go to her and cheer her up.' She was so kind, Nate. So sweet, so full of life. We were supposed to leave tomorrow. Everything was ready." Her voice faltered and the tears came harder. "She was still smiling at breakfast this morning." "How, Nate? How can it all change so suddenly?" she asked, breaking into sobs again. As Nate witnessed Eleanor's profound grief, he could feel her pain and helplessness. "You're freezing out here," he said gently. "Let's get you back to your room." Elenor, overwhelmed and physically exhausted, didn't resist as Nate helped her to her feet and slowly walked her to her room. Once they arrived, Nate discreetly informed a nurse. "Elenor is very tired and distressed," he said. The nurse, after consulting with a doctor over the phone, administered a small dose of a sedative to help Elenor rest. The elderly woman soon drifted into a deep sleep. Nate stayed in her room for a while to make sure she was calm and settled before quietly leaving. Stepping back into the garden for a breath of fresh air, Nate exhaled deeply in the cold night air. His thoughts turned to the harshness of life. Imagining Eleanor's loss and loneliness was unbearable, and he now fully grasped how devastating Beth's death was for her. But something else lingered in his mind, what Elenor had said about her daughter's struggles. While he couldn't take away Eleanor's grief, perhaps he could support her by reaching out to her daughter. With this thought, Nate pulled out his phone and called his supervisor. "I'm sorry to bother you at this hour," he began apologetically. His supervisor immediately asked, "What's wrong, Nate? Is everything okay?" Nate took a deep breath. "I just lost someone. A dear friend of mine. There's a memorial service tomorrow and I'd like to take the day off to attend," he explained. His supervisor responded without hesitation. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Nate. Of course, take the day off. Actually, take two, get some rest." Nate thanked him sincerely and ended the call. Satisfied that everything was in place for the memorial, Nate decided to stay overnight in one of the empty staff rooms at the nursing home rather than go home. As he lay down on the small bed, exhausted from the long day, his thoughts returned to Elenor. He wondered what else he could do to ease her pain even just a little. With those thoughts in mind, he resolved to honor Beth's memory and do whatever he could to support Elenor in this difficult time. The next morning, Nate woke up early to finish the final preparations for the memorial service. He made sure every detail was just right, a fitting tribute to Beth's memory. Once everything was ready, he informed the director and the ceremony began. The nursing home's residents and staff gathered to honor Beth. There was sadness in everyone's eyes, but they were also there to celebrate her life. One by one, people took the podium to share funny and heartwarming stories about Beth. Nate noticed Elenor smiling as she listened. In that moment, he felt that Beth was being sent off in a way that truly honored her. The bittersweet smile on Eleanor's face hinted that even if just slightly, the weight of her grief had begun to lift. As the ceremony came to a meaningful close, Nate approached Elenor and leaned in, speaking softly, "I have a surprise for you." Elenor looked at him with curiosity. "A surprise? What kind of surprise?" she asked. That morning, Nate had spoken with the director about Eleanor's situation and the trip she had planned with Beth. The director had been understanding and supportive. She had even reached out to Eleanor's daughter, Sarah, to explain the situation, and Sarah had warmly welcomed the idea. Just then, a staff member walked over carrying a small suitcase belonging to Elenor. Nate gently guided Elenor by the arm and pointed to a car waiting outside. "We're going to see your daughter. Everything's arranged. Will you let me take you?" he asked with a smile. Tears filled Eleanor's eyes, but the smile that spread across her face warmed Nate's heart. "Oh, Nate. You're such a sweetheart," she said, her voice full of gratitude. Nate helped Elenor into the car and they set off. During the drive, Nate played old songs on the radio, singing along with enthusiasm. Elenor chuckled at his antics but occasionally fell quiet, gazing out the window with tearful eyes. The journey was an emotional one, unforgettable for both of them. When they finally arrived, the door opened to reveal Sarah, her face lighting up with joy. "Mom," she exclaimed, pulling Elenor into a tight embrace. Elenor clung to her daughter, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, I've missed you so much," she said through her sobs. She then turned to introduce Nate. "This is Nate. Nate, this is my daughter, Sarah." For a moment, Nate froze. Sarah was naturally beautiful, with flowing black hair and bright brown eyes that seemed to sparkle. Her warm smile made Nate's heart skip a beat. He quickly regained his composure and extended a hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Sarah," he said. Sarah, slightly flustered but smiling, shook his hand. "The pleasure's mine," she replied, inviting them both inside. As Elenor and Sarah reveled in the joy of reuniting after so long, Nate quietly observed, feeling a sense of fulfillment at being part of such a meaningful moment. Yet, deep down, Sarah's radiant smile lingered in his mind, leaving an impression that he couldn't quite shake. Elenor was filled with joy, but her natural instinct to host kicked in as she asked, "I haven't prepared anything yet, what would you like to eat?" Nate quickly interjected with a playful grin, "Hey, we came here to cheer you up, not to make you cook. We've got a reservation at 8. Elenor and Sarah exchanged surprised glances before bursting into laughter. Nate took them to a lovely restaurant, where mother and daughter caught up while Nate watched with quiet satisfaction. Throughout the dinner, both Elenor and Sarah expressed their gratitude to Nate multiple times. However, a moment occurred during the meal that left a lasting impression on Nate. As he moved his hand on the table, it accidentally brushed against Sarah's. Both froze for a second, and the brief touch carried a spark that neither could ignore. Nate hadn't felt anything like that in a long time. After dinner they returned home. Elenor, exhausted from the trip and the long day, retired to bed early. This gave Nate and Sarah the chance to talk alone. During their conversation, Sarah opened up about her struggles at work and her dissatisfaction with her low pay. She explained how the stressful environment was taking a toll on her and admitted she felt stuck, unable to take a leap in another direction. Sarah worked in social media and was a marketing graduate but lacked the confidence to explore new opportunities. Listening intently, Nate suggested freelancing as an alternative. "You could manage your own time and earn what you truly deserve," he said. Sarah hesitated, voicing her fear, "But what if I can't do it? The financial risk scares me." Nate reached out and gently held her hand, looking her in the eyes. "I'm sure you can do it. You just haven't had enough support," he said with conviction. Sarah was deeply moved by Nate's words, feeling a growing sense of trust in him and a newfound courage blossoming inside her. The next morning, Nate and Elenor began their journey back to the nursing home. Elenor seemed noticeably better, her spirits lifted from the short but meaningful trip. Once they arrived, Nate helped her settle back into her room and graciously accepted her heartfelt thanks once more. The following day, Nate returned to his routine and focused on his work. That evening he picked up his daughter and spent quality time with her before dropping her off at her mother's house and heading home. As he walked through the door his phone rang. It was Sarah. Nate eagerly answered and her excited voice came through. "Oh my gosh, Nate. I applied for a few freelance jobs and can you believe it? One of them just hired me so quickly too." Nate smiled warmly. "Congratulations." "Of course they did. No one wants to miss out on someone as talented as you," he replied. Their conversation was filled with shared happiness before they said goodnight. The next day when Nate arrived at the nursing home for work, he was surprised to see Sarah. She was in Eleanor's room reading a book to her mother. When Sarah saw Nate, her eyes lit up and she exclaimed, "Nate!" But before she could say more, Elenor chimed in joyfully, "Sarah's moving here." Nate, caught off guard but delighted, responded, "Really? That's wonderful news." Later, Sarah approached Nate looking a bit shy. "Would it be okay if I took you out for dinner tonight?" she asked, her voice hesitant but hopeful. Nate chuckled softly and replied, "Of course." That evening, over a warm and relaxed dinner, they opened up about their feelings. Sarah shared how Nate had boosted her confidence and inspired her to take steps she never thought possible. Nate, in turn, confessed his feelings for her. The dinner was filled with a level of intimacy and sincerity they hadn't experienced in years. By the end of the night, a romantic kiss sealed their growing connection, marking the start of something new and beautiful for both of them. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of kindness and second chances. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more inspiring stories like this one. See you in the next video.